Hello everyone, I hope that you are doing fine. Today I would like to talk a bit about trauma and trauma reactions. You might have heard a lot about trauma and trauma symptoms. This field of psychology knowledge has been increasingly growing and flourishing in the recent decades, fortunately. However, we still have a long way to learn. Trauma is considered as any stressful happenings or extremely overwhelming event which potentially places life of our own at risk or endangers others' lives, and also that it impacts us emotionally and psychologically. It results in releasing big and overwhelming feelings which at the time of trauma are difficult for our brain to process, such as strong fear and terror, deep anguish, sadness, shame, helplessness or powerlessness, and so on. So you can say that when the mental psychological pressure exceeds your brain and nervous system's tolerance limits, the harm takes place and trauma impacts your body. The important point is that the very special and individualized experience of the person is the determining factor here. While one person may develop a post-trauma stress disorder after exposure to an overwhelming or impactful event, another person might not react in the same way and will not necessarily struggle with after reactions, with post-trauma stress reactions. So the mental predispositions and tendency to develop psychological symptoms, our vulnerabilities, previous experiences, family backgrounds, genetic factors have a lot to say about the chance for developing a trauma disorder. The thing that I would like to talk a bit and shed light on today relates to the way our bodies react after trauma. We know that trauma make our bodies to shift into a state of heightened or hyperarousal. In other words, the body goes into an overactivated state, which is actually an acute or emergency state. So this is the state which our brains and nervous system functions based on activities which aim to ensure and guarantee survival. So the body will absorb the trauma effect as this is important for survival, because then your nervous system makes sure that you will be safe and survive that specific situation. It is like an emergency solution. So trauma, with all its emotional, cognitive and mental effects and features, goes back into your system, because as mentioned, at the time of happening there was no opportunity at the brain and system level to process and handle that encounter, as it was very tough or too much or very overwhelming. More closely, the thing that happens is that the inner psychic powers and activities will be immediately mobilized to enhance effectiveness of operations to a maximum level and to help the organism to survive. In trauma cases of catastrophic character, this operation fails to succeed, and so the trauma materials, including the related emotions, negative cognitions, and all overwhelming feelings pertinent to it, will go inside our body and get suppressed. They, as we say, live further, these emotions live further in our bodies as unwanted guests. So nearly all people will unconsciously try to forget and disassociate themselves from these stuffs as if it did not happen to them. This is actually a mechanism which our minds choose to apply as a way to help us not collapsing, making us able to go further in our lives. since the unpleasant impact of these traumas are overwhelming and so painful to be allowed to come onto the surface and to the conscious mind. So the avoidance strategies and behaviors we consciously and even unconsciously use to not to remember or relate ourselves to the original memories or representative events will cost our bodies a lot, because then our body has become a store for sparing and giving place to all these stuffs which are associated with overwhelm, unpleasant and scary emotions for our conscious mind. So when we face events and situations which challenge our capacity to cope, we will become a more mentally and psychologically vulnerable human being, as our inner psychological resources are excessively being used to serve unwanted guests and deal with tough and overwhelming unprocessed emotions which actually belong to the past or originate from the past. So the body and nervous system is already struggling with these traumas, and therefore external sources and things which associate with them will be just felt to be unnecessary and very unpleasant. Our mind needs avoidance strategies to protect us from the things, from the people, situations, or whatever that remind us those traumatic experiences. That is why many of us use multiple ways of avoidance on both, emotional and behavioral levels. For example, every time you see a film scene that contains violence or violent actions, especially violence in close relationships, you may get triggered quickly because yourself have been a victim of psychological and physical violence, unfortunately. And even if you indeed are not willing to think back about your adverse experiences, about the tough things that you went through, your body reacts and remembers it. It means that before the conscious part of your brain understands your body is there and has already encoded a familiar danger, then you have perhaps noticed that your physiology will, in accordance with the psychological loads of this imprint, also get affected. For example, maybe you have noticed that your heartbeat gets increased and your breath shortens and so on. This is unpleasant, and you try to remember that this film and soon all such type of films must not be in your film lists anymore. This is only an example of a tiny situation in daily life, right? So imagine that you encounter plenty of such situations where you feel that you react because of getting exposed to very usual daily life things which associate with some previous experiences which were very traumatic or unpleasant. So your life will get more and more restricted, and there will be continuously new areas to avoid and protect yourself from. So the reason why it's happening is that the fear and overwhelming feelings of getting scared and frightened are so pervasive and generalized throughout your body and nervous system that you unconsciously and automatically want to do everything to protect yourself from feeling the pain from all these trauma related materials and all related emotions which get triggered every time you encounter a trigger or face similar situations that recall memories related to the original traumas and traumatic events. So the story is actually very simple. As this, you are surrounded by diverse triggers, the trauma reactions are there, the feelings come up, and you feel that you must have control. and so you avoid them by doing your typical strategies and behaviors such as drinking, eating much or very little, running, exercising too much, talking too much, walking, doing home chores, and so on. But at a deeper level, we can say that you send these materials and feelings back into your system where they have been stored during this time after trauma. And this goes again and again. As the matter of the fact, in fact, you will not be able to kill or remove, get rid of these feelings from your system. Avoiding and suppressing is not a way to, handle these feelings totally. Interestingly, they will not disappear. They will sit there. They will, continuing to exist in your body, waiting for a timely occasion again to come up, to pop up and get released. But every time they are there, they will meet defenses and your avoidance and defense mechanisms, right? So the only thing that they crave, they want, is to get acknowledged and recognized. They want to get, processed and released. But your fear does not allow you to dedicate a place to these feelings and to process it. And it is a very normal and understandable reactions. So it is definitely a good and natural thing to take these feelings up to the surface by your system, because it is a very constructive way that your body does. So your body get triggered, this trauma stuff get activated and want to travel back onto the surface. This is part of actually our inner healing system, which functions in such a way that the unprocessed, remained and not integrated materials from the past should get cleaned, away and categorized into the original, memory folders. Human beings are born with such a psychological healing oriented system. Fortunately, this, the trauma experiences and tough things that happen to us throughout our life can weaken and make this system vulnerable and at some point malfunctional or non-available for us. But such a system will never get unscrewed and turned off totally. This system's main responsibility and mission is to help the organism to maintain balance and equilibrium within itself, and in order to do so, it must do something with unmet and unprocessed stuff that are safe and stored out and about within your body and within your systems and muscles. So the strategy is to channel them into the surface in order to send them out of system and to process them, to sort everything out. And since, as mentioned earlier, these feelings are there just as they were at the time of emergence, or even bigger than that, they demand acknowledgement and recognition again when they are at the surface or into our conscious mind. So it is actually a tough reality because we have to deal with it. Also, it is as simple as it is. I prefer using metaphors for my clients when working with traumas and in therapy work, because it facilitates the process of establishing insight and understanding about phenomena and reactions, not only for my clients but also for myself, because this might sound a bit complicated and difficult to understand for many people. That is why I call this, as placing your feet on brake and gas pedals at the same time. The traumas travel into the conscious mind and make up an intrusive experience for you, because they hope that you will be finally able to meet and recognize them, but you are actually not able to do this since you get scared and you push brake pedals. You intentionally want just to get rid of them, right? Forget them and pretend not to have them at all. So they then have to go back and wait for another triggering situation. This dynamic will exhaust you and create, excessive, too much powerlessness and frustration for you. The tough part is that the people, your family, your friends, would not be able to notice that you are actually struggling a lot. You might feel broken, and very exhausted and tired inside all the time, as this, gassing and braking mechanism consumes a lot of mental and bodily energy, and you will get a very narrow concentration and focus span and poor performance at work or school. In addition, inability to complete daily life tasks and assignments and handling your relationships will be also very common consequences of such inner psychic dynamics and pressure. So healing starts with expanding our capacity to accommodate and tolerate these feelings, and this is not something that you can do alone by your own. You need professional help to do this. So I hope that you have found these reflections helpful and interesting. Please keep in touch and let's connect with another video soon. Thank you.